Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything is Gay, Even the Straight Stuff. My name is Ken, and my job today is podcast, though I have other jobs. And my co host today is also Ken, whose job is being fabulous. Hello, Ken.
Hi, Ken. I think that's how they said it.
Yes,
Well, of
I.
course, I'm English Ken, and you're American Ken.
It's true. All of
Original.
my all of my portions are doubled, and I have a weird fetish where I still love your country, even though we had a divorce in the 1700s.
Oh, indeed. Well, you won't see that recreated. Yeah. Oh, actually, maybe you would if some young boys got together with their Kens and reenacted some sort of like battle scene, and it took part in Barbie Land.
I mean, we do have a whole bunch of. So Trixie Mattel did a review of Barbies. I think it's a
Mm,
couple of years ago now, and she like showed all three sets of the Spice Girl Barbies. So I guess technically we do have the Spice Girl Barbies. But
mm.
except for like Sugar Daddy Ken, we don't really have an English Barbie Ken set that I can think of necessarily.
I'm not sure if you guys have it over there, but I mean, we do have some sort of ish equivalent for young, strapping boys. Action Man always seemed to be what everyone over here had as like a sort of a rough and tough action boy sort of doll. Did you
Well,
have
we
Action Man?
Well, we have like GI Joe, so I don't think we got
Hmm.
Action Man because that sounds a little too generic for American. GI Joe is pretty ubiquitous over here, though. That's why we had those movies that had Channing Tatum in it that nobody remembers but me, and they're not very good. So not
I
Channing,
remember it.
it's not Channing's fault. He's just not really an action
Yeah.
star per se.
Well, not to try and go too off topic, although it's sort of kind of a little bit on topic since it's all doll related. I think I recall that Channing didn't want to come back for the second one, but he was under such tight contractual obligations that he did, and then he allowed himself to get meat, shall we say.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing to kind of watch the evolution of kind of product placement movies, especially. I think the biggest product placement movie that America ever did was probably Jingle All the Way, and that was the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Turbo Man. So
Oh yeah.
Turbo Man's probably about as close as we get to Action Man. Actually, so before Barbie, there have been a whole bunch of movies about stuff. There was Small
Mm.
Soldiers, there was Toy with Robin Williams, there was The Puppet Master, the Chucky, both of which are horror movie franchises, but it's about dolls and
Mm.
things that become sinister. I would argue Orphan about the little girl who's secretly like 30 but pretends she's a kid because she has like a disease for it kind of works in a little bit of a way. Um, there was
Didn't
Battle
you say? Sorry, go on.
there was Battleship, but I can never tell if Battleship was supposed to be based on the board game Battleship or if it was just aliens live in the center of the earth and now they're coming to recompense. I can never really tell, and I don't think Battleship really cares for its own mythology, so it could really go either way with Battleship.
Indeed. With the Battleship reference, I know for a fact it's based on the game Battleship, because this was part of the push from that era to really go into board games
Yeah.
as a means to find inspiration for films. They were lining up a Hungry Hippos film, and it was going to be live action. It wasn't going to be animated. I
Huh.
don't know what that means. They were going to revisit Jumanji.
Well, they
Monopoly
did
has been battled.
technically. They did the live action ones. Technically, that's a revisit of Jumanji. Technically.
True, true. I could, for some reason, I completely overlooked that.
Yeah.
Um, they were Monopoly got a mention about for the 50th time being one. Oh, and they were gonna do another Cluedo. I remember this. They're gonna do one,
Yeah.
but because Battleship failed so badly, it kind of scrapped all those plans.
Yeah. And every about 5 years, someone new attached to the idea of remaking Clue comes out of the woodwork. Barbie had the same problem because Barbie's been a movie that has been pitched around Hollywood about since the mid '80s. And it was kind of a miracle that it got made at all, even before the content of the movie. But it's
Mm,
interesting that so the other big thing obviously is Transformers. And what's interesting
mm,
about American culture, specifically for kids of the '80s, is that all of those TV shows were about selling toys. So the nostalgia for things like Skyhawks, for instance, is about selling Skyhawk toys. A cartoon comes out of the idea of you can sell kids anything if you can get them to watch it on Saturday morning as a ritual. So any
mm,
movie that is going to be based on a product like that has to be aware of the product. And it feels like, especially
yeah.
for the G.I. Joe movies, they were trying so hard to make it serious when the original thing was like, even my beloved Captain Planet was really about selling toys and recycling. And let's be real
Yeah.
about it. G.I. Joe is really about not just the American mythology of strongman, but selling as many toys as possible. The only ones that really didn't come out of that but still became kind of this mecca of toy selling is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. And that poor new movie with
Mm.
CGI that they made for TMNT that came out in the dustbin of Barbie dub went almost straight to video, went almost straight to digital. I have no idea if it was any good or not. I
Oh,
kind of like the concept,
yeah.
but it's one of those things where the irony of Barbie eclipsing. I feel the movie I feel worst for that eclipsed Barbie was the Haunted Mansion one because Justin Simeon is a well-known queer director
Mm,
and he was on Dracula, and I felt so bad. But any movie that was going to come out the weekend after Barbie, after we started seeing how good was just it was just gonna get eclipsed.
mm,
And I felt so bad for. I will probably eventually boot up Disney Plus and watch the Haunted Mansion movie, because
mm.
it's got to be better than the Eddie Murphy one. But yeah, anything that
I
happened outside of Oppenheimer was going to be absolutely eclipsed by Barbie.
mm,
Yeah.
yes. Oppenheimer was kind of spared because of the fact that it tightly bound itself to Barbie.
Yes, it did.
So that's what that's what, as a market, you know, as a marketing strategy, it worked like a dream.
Yeah.
And touching upon a point you made about like we were lucky to finally get Barbie, add that fortune of the fact that the movie actually turned out to be a really good watch as well. It
Yeah.
wasn't just some ditzy product placement thing. It actually had a lot going for it. And the miracle becomes even more so.
Yeah.
um,
You had a
I have
lingering
seen
eye. I'm curious about the lingering eye that I interrupted you because I was going on.
I really Oh, I think I remember I was gonna comment that you could almost argue that Home Alone 2 had a bit of product placement in it because didn't it get take part in a massive toy store
It
part of
did,
the
but the
movie?
Home Alone franchise is mostly known in toydom for the talkback video recorder where you could put in a cassette tape and you could record your voice
Mm.
in a different modulations. So Home Alone apparently is the highest grossing Christmas movie ever made. And as we go into Christmas and as we
Ooh.
talk about live action Grinch next week, I'm always going to have Home Alone in the back of my head. The only reason that we got the Home Alone we did was because Chevy Chase and Chris Columbus could not work together on Christmas Vacation. So the only reason we have Home Alone is because Chevy Chase is apparently super obnoxious and always was. Um,
I
but
didn't know.
that is neither here nor
Mm.
there. But yeah, so Barbie is probably the most interesting movie to come along in a while
Mm.
because Barbie itself was kind of turning into an underground phenomenon of these CGI movies that people that really loved them loved. I don't know if anybody except for Margot Robbie had faith in the Barbie movie, but the faith was rightfully placed. It's a fantastic film.
Mm. I will stand up to defend the Barbie movies here. My partner is a massive fan. He's got one of the box sets of them from about, I think, a decade ago. because they keep releasing like a new one every 2 years. So the moment you get the box set, it's already out of date because they got another one in the works.
Oh, I love
Um,
that. And they've been releasing
y-
since 2001, actually. The Barbie,
mm,
the Barbie CGI films are pretty. There's a like phenomenon of them. So I'm happy
it
for people that love
is.
them. It just missed me completely. I was just too busy to indulge.
Um, so I mean, overall, they're actually not half bad. Um, they can be surprisingly dark in places. I'm not going to try and spoil too much about it, but most of the time, Barbie is in actual peril. It's not some person locking her in a room and that's that. There's the promise of death or fates worse than death in various iterations that she goes through. And the villains actually are pretty nasty, which is again quite surprising because you think it's just going to be um, nice and gentle. But I think because there's not so much expected of them, they have a bit more fun with what they actually get up to do. So yeah, it's definitely worth having a look and see if there's any of them that strike your fancy to check out later.
I do love this idea too, because part of what I wanted to do for this episode, and not just
Mm,
opine about how great the Barbie film is, I want to talk about the Barbie film in respect to what Margot Robbie and Greta Gerwig have actually said about the creation of it. And I
mm,
kind of want to comment, I want to start with the idea of this darkness is really cool. And before we talk about it, I know that before the Barbie movie came out, before we got those fabulous Helen Mirren led narrative narrative trailers, a lot of people were talking about how we already had a Barbie movie because we had that Tyra Banks one, Life Size, and of course, Life Size is incredibly dark because it's about like it's got the nanny syndrome where it's the dad who's the widower and the daughter that's missing a mom, and in Life Size, Tyra Banks is the Barbie doll character who becomes the erstwhile mom until Lindsay Lohan can like grow up and go through her grief. So Life Size and Life Size 2, when people approach Barbie as film material, they don't tend to shy away from darkness, except for the two Barbie and the Rockers movies. But those were just because they were trying to compete with the crowd that loved the Gem TV show and movies, which also have not held up. Barbie and the Rockers were a moment in the 80s that is a choice. Trixie Mattel loves them, and that's enough for me. But I was not in the oeuvre of people that love either Life Size or Barbie and the Rockers. So except for that, there's quite a bit of ability to take the playfulness of Barbie and do something that is kind of
mm.
dark. And there's a lot of
Yes.
light in this movie, but there is darkness in this movie,
But
purposely so. It is
yes.
not without purpose.
Mm. Definitely so. I mean, that I would almost argue that the introduction of a little bit of darkness is what sets the whole chain of events off and actually gives the story gives this movie its story. And it sort of like follows on from there. And it's not necessarily some conceptual darkness. It's a very real, very human darkness because it's coming from places that people can really understand. Um, and I think that's a really potent strength of this movie that, um, you know, at times when it's glitzy and campy, or when at times it's like more somber and down to earth, at all times, I don't think it ever escapes people being able to really emphasize the point that's being made.
Yeah, and to that,
Hmm.
camp here, specifically in this movie, is camp that does not take away from the message. In a way, it's much like a very clean version of what John Waters does, where he takes an extreme and uses it to kind of shine a light on things. Um,
Mm,
the, the Barbie movie is really camp done well and camp done accessibly. because you can clearly see that the Barbie dream houses are not what real houses should look like. They don't have stairs because Barbie doesn't have to use stairs. Um, the one argument I have that I'm still bitter about is they haven't produced a weird house, because the weird Barbie dream house, the weird
Mm,
house is the one that I really like. And I'm
yes.
kind of waiting for Mattel to get off their dust because they have to redesign the dream houses anyways, because they built the wheelchair doll in 2015, and they promised to revamp the dream houses so that the wheelchair user could use the elevator, because it wasn't the elevators weren't wheelchair
Oh,
accessible. So they still need to redesign the dream house anyways. Give me weird Barbie dream house for all of us who
I,
are weird Barbies in real life.
I could see it really happening. If you go on Mattel's website, as we've done over the last couple of months to check whenever there's new products out and such,
Yeah,
Weird Barbie, Sugar Daddy Ken, they've all been out on the website and they've all sold out. So
yeah.
people really want the merchandise from this movie.
They really do. I feel bad for I follow one of the Instagram accounts that does Barbie stuff because I like seeing the Barbie holiday release, and like she had to legit shut off her DMs because people would just not stop asking her the same question repeatedly, and she's like, "Guys, this is a hobby. I need a break. It's okay." But just watching people find enthusiasm for what Barbie represents after seeing this movie is really cool. I don't think that's a mistake. There's such richness to the movie. I'm going to start off with one of the more obvious things that Greta
Mm,
Gerwig has kind of talked about. So she
mm,
talks about the idea of this is illusion, but it's illusion that exists. So this kind of goes back a little bit to what we talked about in Jumanji, where they were still figuring out CGI, so they were still using puppets in some scenes, and that's how some of the animals seem more real because they were physically there. So in this case, there were techniques that were used from Technicolor musicals like The Red Shoes in
mm.
1948, about the ballerina who runs in front of a train when her orchestra husband is being a super dick and is making her choose between ballet, which she loves, and supporting his orchestra. And a movie I haven't seen called The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Cherbourg. I'm sure I'm saying it wrong, from 1964. And both these movies share kind of this heightened scenery and the melodrama of the human experience. Of course, The Red Shoes is kind of the after Center Stage, which is my favorite ballet movie. The Red Shoes is really this movie about the illusion of ballet, the illusion of perfection, ultimate masculinity, ultimate femininity, ultimate expression of high art music. Um, and it's pretty well known that this particular Barbie movie looked really hard at the idea of artifice and how much you could get away with while still being real. Barbie Land
Mm.
is purposely in its own kind of alternate pocket universe. I guess Thanos' snap probably didn't occur there because it just didn't exist there, I guess. It's such an interesting idea of
Mm.
purposely using illusion to make a point and not going that full CGI route and keeping it very grounded in realism, so much realism that you've used all the pink paint. Like there was like a worldwide pink paint emergency because they were using so much of it. And so that's kind of the first thing I wanted to start off with, is the idea that they knew they were making a doll movie and they were so
Mm.
intentional about how the illusion could look both like doll illusion and real. Um, Even
Mm.
something as subtle as the wave that Ken breaks his leg on, quote unquote. Even the illusion of the waves on the beach being plastic instead of actual waves for when they're actually physically seen straight on is just, even that is just chef's kiss, you know?
Yes. Uh, I've always thought that what it gives me when you say illusion and such, it really does remind you of when you are a kid and you're playing with your toys and coming up with you're using your imagination to come up with like a scenario and such. And you know, it's you. You're playing with your toys and such. So you're fully there, but you get caught up in this whole essence of like creativity and like um imagination and such, and anything's possible, and you're making up all these stories and everything. So that line, between realism and fantasy in that moment, that feeling, and that's the essence that you get from Barbie Land. You know, it has its own rules, and but at the same time, like there's such an element of play there with like, everyone sort of like going through um everyone going through like, today we're going to go and vote for the president. Well done, Madam President. You passed laws to abolish this, that, or the other. Well done. Have a medal. The Supreme Court. I have outlawed the evils of the world. Hooray! Oh, everyone
Yes.
clap. That sort of thing. So it's got when it comes to that, they really do capture the essence of play
Yeah.
within Barbie Land.
But there's also tongue in cheek for adults. One of the things that I love, which is blink and
Oh
you'll
yeah.
miss it, um, the Barbie Mount Rushmore, which I still need to get the DVD so I can actually pause to see who's on it. But the first thing on Barbie Mount Rushmore is Christy. That's the first one my eyes drawn to, and she was the first African American Barbie that had like a focus group and intentionality in creating African American features and not just spray painting a white Barbie mold black. And so Christie is very important in canon because it shows the ability of Barbie
Mm,
to grow. And so having her on Barbie Mount Rushmore, not having it just before Margot Robbie's, shows a lot of really fun intentionality. There's also a playfulness with
mm.
this. The scene where Ken is throwing out Barbie's clothes and they like pause so you can see what the outfit is. And I gotta be honest, the palazzo pants I kind of loved. I kind of loved everything that Ken threw out of Barbie's closet. And I'm just thinking, Ken, don't throw those out. Not only are they collector's items,
Oh,
they're fabulous. What are you doing, man? You're wearing a white
oh,
fur
you.
jacket. Keep the palazzo pants. They're gonna go with the white fur jacket.
Oh, my dear boy, you know that was intentional on his part. He knew which items he was throwing out.
Yeah.
They were little.
Yeah. That is kind of my only one big thing that I have with the Barbie movie
Mm,
after the Barbie movie was
mhm,
success. And I feel like I see this more because I
mm,
intentionally wrote a review of Barbie for my school paper where I didn't mention Ken. I feel like all the reviews
mm,
have generally talked about how brave Ryan Gosling was and talked more about Ken than Barbie. And I feel like I've watched a lot of coverage of it, kind of gloss over how amazing America Ferrera is and how amazing the daughter is. Sasha, whoever played Sasha, the one that's super young.
mm,
Um, I feel like a lot of the reviews I've seen of this movie really glorify Gosling and don't give Margot Robbie, America Ferrera, and Greta Gerwig enough credit. And it could be because I'm looking
mm,
for it, but I feel like because the movie didn't center Ken as the star of the film and it really wasn't about him, that all the reviews did that. And I have to say, as much as I love Ryan Gosling, it's kind of like La La Land all over again, where I'm a little annoyed at how much people want to focus on him. Not because he's bad and not because he led a charge to do it. I don't blame him for it. But it felt like people took this movie about learning and growing and female empowerment in a lot of ways and focused on the man. They focused on John Cena as Murken, They didn't focus on the idea that Earring Magic Ken
mm.
doesn't have his cock ring like he should have, except in the credits, which I'm still steamed about because I fashioned a large life size cock ring onto my mesh t shirt. So I was screen accurate for the premiere that I went to, and I was more screen accurate than the Ken they had on screen because they wouldn't even give him like a silver disc and not explain what it was. And it's a big part of the culture of Earring Magic Ken as a discontinued Mattel.
Yeah.
And they got everything else right, right down to Sugar Daddy Ken having a little
Uh,
dog, but they didn't give Earring Magic Ken his cock ring. And they didn't have also Scott Evans as stereotypical Ken because he's not horse Ken, he's stereotypical Ken.
Mm,
They didn't give him a queer romance either. Like they didn't put stereotypical Ken and Barbie together. They had Beach Ken with stereotypical Barbie, but they didn't give. There was no queerness in Barbie Land in the more traditional sense, and I'm still a little toasty. I am a little toasty about all those things, but they're very small pieces of toast because most
mm,
of the smorgasbord was delicious, as Miss Crocombe would potentially say if this was around in Miss Crocombe's time.
mm. Yes, if we're going this might be a good point if we're going to like just bring up the little minor points that sort of the little flaws within the chunk of gold. If we're going to bring them up, we might maybe I should bring up my point now. Um, in hindsight, after watching the movie, I was slightly saddened how they treated Midge. Now, she got her own character poster, but she only appeared like really like 3 times during the movie, twice when she was actively acknowledged by the characters, but the active acknowledgement was sort of like, "Whoa, it's Midge," in a kind of like taken aback, shocked, and dare I say, like slightly like stay away from me sort of aspect. And I, that's in hindsight, that saddens me a little bit because the whole the whole one of the main themes about Barbie was learning like sort of like to accept things that aren't perfect and things that don't fit the mold, so to speak. And Midge as like a motherly figure would have actually been an interesting like exploration of that. But I know they were really struggling for time and they
Yeah.
had so many characters, it would be difficult to squeeze that in as well.
I do wonder if the kind of weird grossness about Midge being perpetually pregnant wasn't also related to how they Will Ferrell portrayed the Mattel CEO. Because I know that Mattel was trying to use
Mm.
Ferrell's portrayal to be like, "We're cool guys. We know that you think Barbie's dorky, but we're gonna bring her back. You know, we're super cool." So I do wonder if the Midge was also that like wink and nod to Mattel, and that Mattel had their hands in it a little bit because they had to approve this movie because it's
Yeah.
their stock and trade and it has been since Barbie's birthday. Um, which she does have an official birthday. She has two, but I mean the official birthday, not the one in one of the films. Her official birthday. Um,
Mm,
but yeah, so I found that a little troublesome, but I think probably because Greta Gerwig knows how to put a movie together, that I wouldn't be surprised if the two were linked, if only because at the end of the movie, the CEO comes out of Midge's house, treehouse, playhouse, whatever Midge's house was
mm.
next door. So I am
Yeah.
90% sure they're linked in some manner. Quite
Mm,
famously, Pregnant Midge is also the least popular of the discontinued Mattels, pretty famously, which is kind of a weird fame to have. But yeah, I don't know if it was animosity, but I don't know that it came across the way they wanted it to.
mm.
I will say, as much as people don't think Matchbox 20 is cool anymore, using a Matchbox 20 song brought me so much joy. Also, the song on the radio in the car, I did not know for a long time was Indigo Girls. So, for the people that sent me messages when I was asking about what the song was on the radio, um, I did finally find out it was Indigo Girls. So, thank you everyone for that.
Mm. That's, I suppose I should draw back and say, like, as as much as that little part troubled me, I really want to say that I love how much thought and care to attention did go into this film.
Yeah.
Like, you've already mentioned some examples of it. Like, it's easy to watch this as surface level, but I think you really truly enjoy it when you see, like, it was very careful how they did the theming and all the references. Um, did you see the Bratz reference during
Yes,
the
I
film?
did. I don't know if I agree. I think that might
Mm,
actually be too subtle. I think it's incidental because if they were to do a Bratz reference, it would
mhm.
make more sense to actually do a Monster High reference as well, and they didn't. because Bratz and Monster High both
Yes, yeah.
posited to knock Barbie off. I think the biggest intentional choice they made that I loved, after Sasha, because I do think the mother daughter dynamic is amazing and pretty much
Mm.
on par with America Ferrera's speech in the Dream House. And the reveal of the video star Barbie as being like, "This is no one's dream," I think was pretty genius. The intentionality of casting Issa Rae as President Barbie and having Margot Robbie not be President Barbie and just be a stereotypical Barbie, almost
Mm.
watching Barbies from the sideline, and having her be both protagonist but also almost side character in her own movie at the beginning of it
Mm.
is such a great careful choice, because if it had been Amy Schumer who was rumored to be cast, maybe if it had even been Anne Hathaway who was rumored to be cast after Amy
Mm.
Schumer left the project, I don't think it would have worked. There's something about Margot Robbie in her roles where she is both able to take the lead but can also let others shine. And I think if people look at that montage of stereotypical Barbie watching other Barbies excel and just very slowly realizing how on the sideline she is in Barbie Land, even though she is quote unquote the Barbie you remember, is such a cool way to do a movie. I think it's actually cooler
Mm.
than starting out with the 2001 Space Odyssey homage. I
Mm.
think those scenes are just incredible.
Oh,
The only thing that's
yeah.
more incredible is the Holland tulip field that you have to go biking through to get back to the sequence to get in and out of Barbie Land is just it's a reverse Wizard of Oz
Yes.
picture, which I love.
Mm.
And it's such a those they built those backdrops too. So if you look on, I don't know if it's on the DVD special or if it just got released, but if you actually watch the behind the scenes, people had to physically go through those. Like they built those sets physically. So those aren't CGI green screen backdrops. You literally have to bike through a 2D cartoon painted tulip field. You literally have to go through the snowstorms. Like you have to go through the physical experience of these almost flat, almost 2D backdrops. It's such
Mm.
a really good classic theatrical technique that is really harking back to that Technicolor stuff. And it's part of what makes this Barbie movie iconic for me is that intentionality of we are physically putting these things in space, both in the physical object and the idea.
Mm. And you could almost argue it's a throwback to using backgrounds that come with toys and such within play
Yeah.
and seeing that translated into the film, um, as well as like the theater technique that you mentioned as well. And it would have been it would have been so easy for them to done it in CGI, but the fact that they put that extra bit of effort into
Yeah.
making it that people, because when people see it, they get what they're seeing. You know, they get the reference of what's going on, that they've seen it whenever they've gone to the theater and such as that. So again, it's one of those little nods and winks to the audience. And I think audiences always appreciate that sort of like little call out to them. And
Do you-
Barbie does it in spades.
So we're about halfway through the episode. I'm going to ask you a relatively charged question that we can think about before we go to our break.
Oh,
So
right.
quite famously, Margot Robbie pitched that this movie was going to make $1 billion. She said she did so a little jokingly, that it was kind of over the moon, beyond her wildest dreams. She was surprised the movie was even getting made. The other part of that quote, though, not quote, but the other part of that attribution is she referenced 1993's classic boundary pushing, technologically Jurassic Park. I don't know if you've seen Jurassic Park, so this may be a loaded question, but do you see Barbie on the same level of Jurassic Park, which is a movie people still think of to this day, still watch, still kind of a gold standard
Ooh.
of both 90s and all cinema, really, all kind of new cinema. So do you think that was a warranted thing that Margot Robbie said, that it was close to Jurassic Park?
Ooh. That is quite a question. And unfor mm, see, there's several bits to it. The first bit I would say is it's difficult to take two movies that are quite different in essence and see if they quite like you can quite equate them with each other. The thing is, with Jurassic Park, it was quite revolutionary when it came out. I don't think there was anything quite like it at the time, and it revitalized the whole love for dinosaurs that was in popular culture there. It waned in the preceding decade or so, and then it came Jurassic Park came out of nowhere and it founded its own dynasty. Um, but the thing is, we've had Jurassic Park for 30 years now.
93
It's
was
had
when the first one came out. I know when the book came
yeah,
out, but it's based on a book, so I have no idea when the book came out.
yes. Jurassic Park has had 30 years to really soak itself into the cultural mindset. So I was wondering to myself if Barbie has enough cult power to be something that people are going to be rewatching in the same period of time in the future. Obviously, people will catch it, especially if you're a Barbie fan. But Jurassic Park, it sort of has a kind of a very as much as it can be scary, especially for the younger kids, there's almost like a family adventure thriller aspect to it. Now, Barbie, I think it's definitely something the family could watch. I just wonder, does it have enough rewatchability? It, mm, it's difficult. I think Barbie will have quite an impact because the sheer success of it, I think, will encourage some other people with franchise names to come forward now and try and do movies. And I think Mattel is going to look at continuing to do movies from now on.
Descendants, the motion picture the motion picture event of the year, Descendants. They finally bring all of them together. They're gonna make Cheyenne Jackson put on that blue wig again.
Well, Descendants 4 is coming out some point soon, and they've got a whole new bunch of the little blighters coming into it. So, um, but yeah, I don't know. It's difficult to judge a property with such a legacy behind it, being sorry, a film property with such legacy against really what is quite a newcomer to cinema. In the sense, well, definitely in the sense of like the big screen and such.
Yeah, and that's fair. And
I don't know.
it's a
Mm,
question of when Margot Robbie said Jurassic Park, did she mean the idea of the fantasy? Did she mean the otherness? Was she talking about the technology of it? But
mm,
for whatever reason, that was what she pointed to. And I want to let the audience
mm.
think about it, and they can get in touch with us, let us know what they think. So there's a lot that has went into the thoughtful preparation of the script and the world and the movie. So now we're going to get into some more like philosophical stuff. So is there anything that you want to say that's slightly more like grounded before we start getting kind of philosophical and fun and I start having to explain words like humanism?
Before we settle down in the parlor with our pipes and our cups of tea and
before we
discuss
start
things of
getting
merit.
before we start getting into the inexplicable airplanes that somehow have open windows that open up like airplanes do not have, but you
Mm,
need a helmet when you get in space. Yes, before we
mm,
go into outer space to
yes.
visit the Barbie aliens, is there anything you want to say that's more like grounded than the philosophical stuff in the second half here?
Mm. Um, I think one point I would like to quickly raise is Barbie Land as a conceptual entity. Now, what I found quite fascinating in the film was the fact that Barbie Land exists as a location, a locale, but it is very much its own separate world. Um, I found it. I found this great that throwaway scene where is it the FBI or the CIA? I think it's the FBI. Um, Getting
Yeah,
in
the
contact with
FBI
Mattel
calls.
headquarters.
Yeah, the FBI calls the low
In-
level drone and is like, "You need to get your Barbies." And we find out like Barbies have been like coming through into the real world for a long time.
Mm.
Fabulous, fabulous continual
So,
joke in the film. So
so my headcanon for this is Barbie Land is an other world similar to Neverland, to Wonderland, to these other worlds which are influenced by people's imagination and creativity. This particular other world has been influenced by specifically the play the play motions and imaginations of people with Barbie dolls. So what that probably opens up the scope to is the FBI is keeping track of potentially dozens and hundreds of these different play worlds, and this is just a matter of the fact, sort of. That's probably why one of their own drones got in touch with Mattel and
yeah,
just filed it as like a normal Tuesday call. We've got
what's
bigger fish to
yeah.
fry because we got the things from Jurassic Park coming through the wormhole as well. We got to get rid of them.
That's an interesting
That's
idea too. Is that you have to work for it, but you can leave Barbie Land. So the difference between like a Wonderland type scenario where you have to do all this stuff and learn a lesson in order to leave, or like in the Wizard of Oz, where no matter when Dorothy wants to go, she's always summoned back. Um,
mm,
it's not such like a hard and fast thing. Like it is kind of a blink and you miss it idea that all five members of NSYNC are somehow Allens. It's kind of a blink and you miss. We had a skipper come through that like tried to do her like doll babysitting duties. It's kind of this interesting blink and you miss of how you build a world within a world. It has almost like a Harry Dresden wizard. Like if you look in the shadows of society, you're gonna see like a detective Barbie somewhere in the world that you didn't expect. Um, and it's the idea of these dolls wanting to choose to come over into this world of imperfection, even if they don't know exactly what they're choosing to do.
mm.
It also helps that NSYNC was made quite famously into. I don't know if they're Barbies, but they got made into dolls for their No Strings Attached album. So like, there's like a doll within a doll within a real person within a doll thing going on, which I love.
Inception.
Inception.
And I said
Yeah.
interception.
Oh,
Sorry.
either way, no, that works fine. Also, the fact that Michael Cera kept trying to leave as Alan, he was like, "I'm gonna bounce. I'm not really here to save anything." And it takes America Ferrera and Sasha, who's I can never remember her actress name.
Um. Oh, it's Oh, I looked it up. It was a a Dairy. Oh, Christ alive! Why did I forget to bring up? I'll bring up just now. One moment.
Yeah, but it's the idea that Michael Cera is ready to turn tail. Like he can fight, he just doesn't really want to. Michael Cera was amazing cast. I like Michael Cera in this movie more than I liked him in Scott Pilgrim. The more times I rewatch Scott Pilgrim, the more
Oh,
problematic it
sh-
gets. And Michael Cera does
that's
not make that
fair.
problematic lessen at all. Like Scott Pilgrim as a film, I haven't read the manga series, so maybe it's better. But Scott Pilgrim as a film is like, oh, we really loved this. There's some troubling messages in this film. Even Chris Evans kept wallpaper
Mm.
over how troubling
Oh
uh
yeah.
Scott Pilgrim's issues are. But Michael Cera in both Juno and Barbie, I think, was better casting than Scott Pilgrim. I think in Juno specifically, he does a really great job. But yeah, Michael Cera
Mm.
is a character actor that works well in ensemble with bright spots to shine, and I think Barbie shows that really well.
Mm. Sasha was played by Ariana Greenblatt.
Yes. Okay. Fabulous. Yes, we have a name.
Excellent. We got that out of the way.
We've got that out of the way. and I kind of forgot the point I was making with it. So whatever I was trying to say, I've forgotten. Um,
Mm.
yeah, but
Um, it it was something about Sasha and America, and then pulling um
yeah,
Alan back to Barbie Land because well, yeah, he could. It seems like he could leave if he
I
really wanted
wanted
to, but
to.
he stayed.
Yeah. So it's the idea that this film understands its source material. Greta Gerwig was
Mm,
influenced a lot by her own experiences of her mother discouraging her from purchasing Barbies but relenting. And like
mm,
there are terms on, and so I'm looking at the Wikipedia page about the Barbie film, and there's a whole section on writing, which is maybe the longest section on the writing of a movie since I've seen, since the section trying to describe what's happening in the TV show Lost. Because that's a beefy read, if only because there was so much happening. But they use these big technical terms to talk about the idea of Greta Gerwig understanding Barbie as contradiction, understanding that Barbie is, a woman that has a career, but also has all the stuff associated, not just with the career, but also with almost having too much stuff, like the critique of
mm,
consumerism. There's some throw in stuff about like how this is like a Shakespearean play. There's words like humanist associated with the idea of Barbie asking, "Do you guys ever think about dying?" But really what it boils down to, because even after all the things with Paradise Lost and the Apostles' Creed, which are both mentioned in this Wikipedia page, this is a movie that is comfortable in doing something that is really hard to pass for a modern consumer in a lot of ways. And I think this is part of why people went back to see it more than once. I think the first time they see it, they go to half the party, and to do it as a communal event, and to do it as something to get
mm,
out of the house and to celebrate. But the second time you watch it, you notice that they don't shy away from Barbie's history and
mm,
kind of the idea that Barbie Land is a place that celebrates an updated but still kind of in the vacuum version of feminism that then Sasha knocks down, and that throws Barbie because she doesn't
mm,
think that's what Barbie and Barbie Land is, but that's what it is to some people. The idea of all these different outfits that Barbie has, but some of them are dated, so they've left in the past, but they still exist because the stuff exists. The
mm,
idea of not being afraid to both poke fun at and talk about the idea of the Barbie ideal, in so much is that people love the Barbie ideal so much they try to get plastic surgery to look like Barbie or Ken. Uh,
mm,
there's something about Greta Gerwig sitting and noting these kind of controversial contradictions that is great that other movies with those same problems don't. So I'm thinking specifically about a couple years ago they made a Peter Pan movie that was like hyper realized, hyper specific. I think Luke Evans played Captain Hook, if I remember correctly. Someone really famous played Captain Hook, but
oh,
it was
yes.
like this origin story for Pan and Hook, and it was supposed to be like really
What?
well received and really liked.
Mm,
But
yes. Go.
yeah,
Sorry, go on.
but it doesn't deal with the contradictions of who Peter Pan is. The more we look at Peter Pan mythology, the more you see how scary and domineering he is. Something they did really well in Once Upon a Time in the revelation. The revelation of Peter Pan really gets lost in the revelation that he's also connected with all the other characters, which I think they could have done without. But the revelation of Peter Pan as a sort of imp figure that we never really get. We don't get it in the movie Hook because one, we weren't having that conversation, and two, that's not the movie it
Mm,
was. But something Barbie does that that version of Peter Pan didn't do, which might have made that version of Peter Pan richer, is the idea of Peter Pan being an imp. So the idea of Barbie both living in a world where they celebrate the fact that, feminism is over and we won and all the women can be who they want to be, versus the real world of no, women really can't be who they want to be. And also the patriarchy can infect you and damage you in ways you don't even know. Like there's there's an
Hmm.
incredible ability, and it would be so easy to have messed up. And I just want to be able to sit and celebrate the idea that not only was it playfully done, but it was well done. That all of these
Hmm.
contradictions and the idea of Barbie as consumer and the idea of harmful stereotypes about what makes a real woman and the idea of how much pressure a woman has to have to be unattainable could have failed so hard. I think it's part of why the female Ghostbusters didn't succeed as well was because both fanboys
Hmm.
were awful, but also, except for a little bit of stuff about Ghost Girl, they never really acknowledged that having four women do this was kind of incredible and still oddly groundbreaking. And something the Barbie movie did is they were
Hmm.
like acknowledging a girl can like pink and be very smart, but also we have to say that. And isn't it kind of weird we still have to say that?
Hmm.
I think the most interesting thing about the Barbie movie for me is that even though the male characters aren't smart, they're not. Well, they're not smart, but they're played the way that Kevin was played in. So this was the Chris Hemsworth character in the female Ghostbusters, where it's an intentional role where they're not playing dumb, but them being the center of the movie isn't what's supposed to happen. It's such a hard thing to like
Hmm.
figure out the right word for, because they're not dumb.
Yes.
They played it very smart. The idea of Ken having a power ballad really works, which I wish
Hmm.
people would focus on other parts of the movie more. But I understand why you love it. It's this idea of being okay with talking about the contradictions. I think it's something that's also a nod
Hmm.
to Stanley Kubrick, because Stanley Kubrick films often talk about contradiction. 2001 is the ultimate example of that. The reason Hal has a mental breakdown is he has two conflicting programming in him that was given, one secret
Hmm.
program and the one he's actually doing. And that's what causes him to have the breakdown that causes him to murder everyone. And so
Hmm.
there's the idea of being comfortable in the contradiction of Barbie Land really thinks something different and it's an illusion. But once Barbie knows, after she has a dark night of her soul, she's able to like get up because she has support in getting up. The scene with
Hmm.
Gloria doing her makeup is such an important scene, almost as important as Gloria giving the speech. But Gloria
Hmm.
doing the makeup and Barbie being like, is he going to like me anymore? And that earnest human emotion of the idea of being
Hmm.
wanted, which is something she's never grappled with. It's such that the whole third act of that film could have fallen flat and it didn't, and it worked. And I
No.
was so glad for the casting they did with Rhea Perlman as Ruth. Rhea Perlman as Ruth just being hidden somewhere in the Mattel building, and Ruth just being somewhere, so that when a Barbie comes to life and asks the question, they find each other.
Hmm.
I think it was genius. And I do think
L-
if you look at how movies are
Hmm.
structured, as a traditional three-act structure, Barbie really does succeed. It's something familiar, but they
Hmm.
do break it a little bit. And I think that works really well.
Yes. Ooh. Some. No, I completely agree with everything that you said. Um, there's so many points that one could raise about this movie. Um, I'll see if I can get a few good points together.
Yeah.
Um, it's interesting that there's a real spiritual element to this film. It really feels like the film could have been expected not to have it, but there is. You mentioned Ruth. She's there watching over her creation and such. Um, and almost takes the figure, particularly towards the end, of a gentle guiding spirit
Yeah.
to Barbie as Barbie is transitioning. You mentioned before about the Kens, it's difficult to describe their mindsets and how they are. And I wonder if it's important to point out the fact is these are dolls. These are not what one could consider a like a human as we understand it. These are beings that came into existence through imagination and thought from our world, and they've been brought to life. They've been brought to life by belief, almost belief in concepts, belief because there's nothing to say that these dolls were born as we understand it. And Ruth is very specific to say that Barbie is becoming something like more than what she was before. She's becoming something different what she was before. She's becoming a human. So what she was before was not human. So it like the whole thing of like their mindsets are different. And particularly the way like they were influenced by the foreign, I say in quotation marks, ideas that Ken brought back
Yeah,
and the way that everyone is affected by the inclusion of these ideas. There's actually a very interesting way that you can view it, almost like biology in a sense. You know, of got this sort of still community, and it's introduced to a foreign substance which affects everyone,
yeah,
and it's sort of like like trying to like repair, well, not totally repair the damage because this introduction actually leads the Kens to a bit more self-awareness of themselves as well, in a
yeah,
sense. We're going into the whole thing of self-awareness, which is actually, I believe, what the catalyst was that allowed stereotypical Barbie to become
yeah.
human.
And it's
Um,
also something we see in other movies, not just about dolls, but in
mm,
other movies altogether. One of the other big influences on this film that I was surprised to learn is that
mm,
Barbie took the same idea of class structure and the awareness of how damaging hierarchy is from Planet of the Apes, which is the movie where
mm.
Charlton Heston got lampooned by the Simpsons in the Planet of the Apes musical. But there's an idea of uh, the power structure is so implicit and explicit both in and out of Barbie Land because they did mirror
Mm,
Barbie Land on the thoughts of people, and in Barbie Land, everybody has a job, even if you don't know where they live. Everybody has an identity, and everybody except for the Kens who were not even represented in Congress. And now I'm catching myself talking about Kens more than Barbies. Uh, there's a hierarchical power structure because humanity gives ourselves those hierarchies. I can't envision a version of Barbie Land where that hierarchy couldn't exist. You almost have to have it in a doll
mm,
imbued with human elements. Small Soldiers had that too, which is one of the other great movies about dolls I can think of.
mm.
It's only when you break down hierarchical structures you get both Chucky and the Puppet Master series because they don't have a hierarchy. They're just out doing bad things in their dolls, except for Jennifer Tilly. I guess Jennifer Tilly is kind of the Madonna of the Chucky universe because she's kind of the mother of all things, and she's a survivor. Maybe she's the Reba of the Chucky universe. I love Jennifer Tilly in the Chucky movies and the Chucky TV show. That's the end of that diatribe.
Oh, um, mm. The thing is, you're quite right. I would say that don't punish yourself too much for bringing up about the Kens again. I know the move. I know it's very important to like focus on Barbie as she is the focus of this movie. But what I found quite fascinating was the fact that the movie takes attention and pains to show both of their journeys. And I would almost argue that this movie would not have been as great if you didn't have those two different stories sort of almost happening side by side because they do start off together um and they go on the journey together and Barbie and Ken both have very different outcomes from their journeys, but I think it's both what they needed. They're doing like a Princess and the Frog reference here, where it's not what you want, it's what you need is the important thing here. And what Barbie needed was sort of like to discover who she was, and what Ken needed was to discover that he's not just an accessory. He doesn't need to like find validation through Barbie acknowledging him. So there's a really strong two different sides to it. And like, I mean, that's why the jumper says he is Kenough. And
Yes.
that's why Barbie, like, I think the ending of the film was perfect with how Barbie going to her first gynecologist session, wasn't it? That's how you say
Yes.
it. Um,
Yes.
because that almost is the perfect little way to show that Barbie Barbie has become a real woman. Oh God, it sounds awful just saying.
It was also very important, not just to show she become a real woman, but to kind of
Mm,
refute the idea of this as a. I don't know why this is a thing because I didn't read this anywhere, but on the Wikipedia it talks about the idea of
mm,
this is expressly not a coming of age story, and I guess some people have tried to make it into that, but it is much deeper than that. In a way, I think if you're going to call it a coming of age story, it would have to be for the Kens. One thing that's interesting is that they never show, except for them making the Mojo Dojo Casa house, they never
mm,
really show the boy version of what happens to the Kens. There's no boy version of Sasha. There's no boy version of America Ferrera's character. The husband is not really in the movie. He's just very supportive and trying to learn Duolingo, which is kind of a throwback to all of us living in the pandemic era. Um, but except for the Mojo Dojo Casa Dollhouse, which is saying house four times, but I absolutely love it. There's not really a focus on um, what patriarchy does except for what it does to Ken. And the fact that it just kind
mm,
of still exists in the world and then that Ken becomes infected by it is such an interesting idea. And I think that's where it splits with Shakespeare because there is some kind of
mm.
Shakespeare. It's called Shakespeare's maximalism, which I really don't know what that means necessarily. But I think it's where it starts moving away from Shakespeare is because I have a hard time picturing Shakespeare doing the closest like character that is infected with ideals in Shakespeare is Hamlet. And Hamlet was already on the edge with
Mm.
grief. So like in a way, Ken breaks from that Shakespearean structure. But also Barbie lives her own life away from Ken too, except for when he takes
Mm.
over her dream house, which was hers and was never going to be theirs, but he tries to claim it as theirs, um, which is a really interesting. Like, I'm kind of curious about how Greta Gerwig pictured, because I know the idea of Ryan Gosling being cast was about Ken being found face down in the mud alone and how girls don't really play with Kens. But I'm kind of curious about the thought of boy in this film and where Ken
Mm.
picks up his belief system from. Not because I want to detract from Barbie, but I'm curious about that thought process.
Mm.
Noah Baumbach, who is Greta Gerwig's partner, helped her co-write the screenplay. I guess he was brought on
Mm.
when she was brought into the project. So I'm kind of curious about the idea of Ken and how Ken's worldview is, because we only really get it
Mm.
through the selling of the Mojo Dojo Casa House,
Yeah.
which just makes me think of the Powerpuff
Yeah.
Girls. When you say Mojo Jojo in a sentence, it just makes me think of the Powerpuff Girls. So
And to take a step further, the worldviews of the other Kens, um, because they all are subtly different in their personalities and how they interact. Like it's interesting. There's certain element of similarness to like how they were all acting around the different Barbies and such. But at the
except
same
Simu
time, they've
Limu's
clearly
Ken
got
can
their own
do a
minds.
backflip. Simu Limu's Ken can do a backflip, and one of them can play drums. Because in the bonfire section, one of the Kens
Yes.
plays drums, which doing a drum version of doing a drum version of whatever that bonfire song was. I think they weren't doing Push then. I think they were doing. They might have been doing an Incubus song,
Yeah.
I don't remember. But one of them
Mm.
was just playing drums on the beach. I'm trying to think of the drum solo version of that song would be more hilarious than I'm just imagining a whole bunch of Kens doing a steel drum version of Push by
Yeah.
Matchbox 20 on a beach. It's great.
Mm. Oh, is sorry, I'm just trying to think of exactly where to go from here because
Yeah,
there's several different points that one could go down
yeah,
discussing this film, but it all comes back to the fact is that there's so much fault in the writing and what they try to say in this film.
yeah,
Like the whole sort of like um feminism versus patriarchy, um injustices of what happens to gender when it is flipped around and when, you know, when things are not equal, the balance between people because if they identify differently.
yeah.
In terms of identity, I think this is why it would appeal to a lot of people within the community. Um, because I think we can empathize with the struggle that that the dolls are feeling for trying to find their own way.
Yeah, and disturbingly enough, there are other dolls in Barbie Land, not just the discontinued ones, but specifically Kate McKinnon's Weird Barbie. It's not
Mm.
coded. She's literally called Weird Barbie to her face and lives in a dollhouse on a hill far away from other Barbies with discontinued Barbies that you only see the second time you see her, which means they were listening likely into the conversation the first time in hiding because stereotypical Barbie either doesn't interact with them or doesn't know how to talk to them. So the message of othering in this film is very strong in what is
Mm.
not shown in that first scene because you can be distracted by the oh this is a Matrix homage, but if you look at it again in the second scene, knowing that Sugar Daddy Ken video Barbie is there, the
Mm.
Barbie with the boobs that grow bigger is there, knowing that they're in the
Mm.
shadows unseen by stereotypical Barbie and aren't seen until she's in her dark night of the soul is something that maybe can be grappled with later. The more people see this movie, the more they start writing essays about it. I'm hoping we'll get our Barbie pop psychology book at some point because all the big stuff in the 2000s got pop psychology books about it. And I'd really
Mm.
love to see the pop psychology book for this Barbie movie.
Mm. Indeed. It, I mean, it's not surprising that she didn't know that they were there because the Barbies, like, because they're sheltered within their own perfect mindsets, they don't even know where the Kens live,
Yeah.
for God's sakes. Like, the fact that it's like someone asks, like, well, where does Ken go at night? Oh, I don't know. It's like the thought never occurred to them.
Yeah.
And it comes back to the whole illusion of perfectionism again. I think a theme that could really be seen at within this movie is it's a tale of stillness slash stagnation and change. Barbie Land is a place of stillness, and Barbie herself says it. Every day is the same. Every day is perfect. Every day continues as it was, which I find strange because of the fact that the Barbies seem to be connected to humans in some way. So the fact that the influence hasn't done something crazy before, although it has actually, because
A
it made
couple,
some of the
yeah.
Barbies leave.
Yeah,
Um,
but
but then,
it's rare. It's rare that it happens. Like maybe it's the
yes,
idea of that like the kids eventually stop playing, but that Barbie stays in whatever avenue the kid was before they stop playing with it. Um,
maybe.
it's hard to
Uh,
say. Yeah,
we're talking about a conceptual metaphysical
it's true.
connection between entities, so who knows what?
I do have so I have two things left, and we're getting close to the
Okay.
end of the episode because we've actually been talking about this. So the two are kind of questions slash last minute things. So the first one
Mm.
is the iconic glittery Barbie logo thing that we all did the AI generator selfie thing for when the movie first came out. Is based on a really, really popular slogan, actually, a really popular visual slogan that's been around since the 1970s. Do you know what that Barbie logo from the movie is based on?
No, I have to admit, no.
It is based on the very famous Milton Glazer's I Love New York logo, which is the one which is I with the heart and Y. So it's the power of
Oh,
simplicity in logo, which is really cool. The power of longevity in logo, and also recreating a logo for the icon Barbie specifically for this property. I don't know how the CGI movies do it, but I don't know if they even have their own Barbie logo or if it's just like Barbie and Barbie font. Uh, I will say the only thing that I really want still from this movie, which this is not a question, but SNL was doing those Barbie Instagram things with like sometimes a guest stars, and it was like a little skit about in the Barbie Mattel offices, them trying to get really silly, weird interns to like do Instagram messages for Barbie. I would like that for the Barbie movie, but I think that might be out of Lauren Michaels. Keenan Michael Thompson could do it because Keenan Michael Thompson can do anything. Um, the other question I have, and then we can do final thoughts, is what is Barbie's official birthday?
without me looking it up, I haven't got a clue in the world.
Uh, Barbie's actual official birthday is the same day of the American International Toy Fair where she debuted, and that would be March 9th,
Ah,
1959. So, for all you people that do astrology, Barbie's birthday is March 9th of every year, which means she's probably not an Aries, but that's okay because not everyone can be as perfect as we Aries are. Yes,
uh, oh, hmm. Yes, so I suppose it's time for those final thoughts, good sir.
it's
Did
true.
you want to take it away?
Yeah. So my final thought is that I was not just impressed with the movie, but the culture that
Mm,
surrounded it. One of the things I want to give a
mm,
shout out to was the surprising. I did not know this. It took me a long time to realize this. The song at the end where Barbie does her transition into being human is a Billie Eilish song. Very like not what I would think of. Very surprising. The music video for it is kind of incredible, actually. The soundtrack is almost as good as the movie itself. There are some spots where it doesn't work for me as well. Um, but I think overall, from how this movie was advertised, how it was written and structured, and the thought behind it, the gift is going to be Barbie. The curse is going to be Mattel and whoever was I think it's Warner Brothers, whoever was the studio
mm,
trying to recapture this lightning in a bottle. But if they were smart, they'd realize this was maybe a once in a lifetime thing. I don't
mm,
think it'll have the cultural impact of, say, Wizard of Oz, but it might, because
mm,
Wizard of Oz's cultural impact only happened when it started being run annually on TV. It wasn't actually as popular until its like second or third run as we think of it today. But it does share a lot of
okay.
traits with those
Mm,
classic MGM films. It shares a lot of like
mm,
familiarity, but with a much stronger message than I think even Wizard of Oz has. Because my main complaint with Wizard of Oz is why is she going back to Depression era Kansas? Um, and here it's something where Barbie returns to Barbie Land, and though it's not easy, she gets up and she's able to do things with community around her. I
mm,
think even for the stuff I have little quibbles with, it is a really great movie. Um, and I
mm,
think as the type of medium it's in and the story it tells and how it structures itself visually, I don't want to call it the perfect movie because I'm not sure that it's that, but it's probably about as close to what a perfect movie in the age we live in can look like. It was so thoughtfully done, it was so well cast, and it's something that I would be surprised if it doesn't come up again and again as sort of a new gold standard of film. I think it will outlast Oppenheimer. I think they were smart to put them together. but I think they're so different
Mm,
that Barbie's going to far
yes.
outlast however far Oppenheimer goes. And if you haven't had a chance to see Barbie, pop in the DVD, Blu-ray, 4K, whatever we're using now. It's all on disc or on streaming. This is a movie you can see with other people, and it really does work as both an individual or communal movie. Um,
Mm, yes.
I really definitely did enjoy it. I even with
Mm,
my desire for it to be more queer, it is very camp, so it has queerness. But I do wish they would have given Earring Magic Ken a cock ring, or given Scott Evans Ken a Ken of his very own. But we can't have everything we
mm.
want. And if they decide to do a sequel, maybe the sequel will be Ryan Gosling Ken discovering he loves cowboys as well as horses. Who knows? Um, Regardless of that, this movie, as it stands, is probably one of the best journey movies ever made. Um, I liked Princess and the Frog enough. I actually love the illusion of that. And so that's kind of where I'm going to end my thoughts on the Barbie movie. And I've given you 2 minutes to
Mm.
talk.
Um, I'm waiting for the day that we will finally have crystals as our form of sort of DVDs of the future, because I do like the notion of like popping a little shining crystal into my device and I can watch probably 10,000 movies off it. But that's my little bit of sci-fi there. In terms of more realistic things, shall we say the Barbie movie? Um, yes, I completely echo you with your thoughts on it. I really enjoyed it. Um, Minor quibbles aside, I think it probably is going to be the movie that people remember from this year. Oppenheimer, it's all right, but it's very much a historical movie, and unless there's something a real good catch of it, I think that'll just be relegated to people that actually have an interest in watching it. Whereas Barbie feels like it could become a phenomenon. And certainly Mattel seems to be giving indications it's gonna probably make a franchise out of this. So if they do that, I'm looking forward to Barbie Halloween movie, where she and her girl pals get, well, maybe it won't be this Barbie. They probably do one on another Barbie or something. I don't know. It'd be
There's a
interesting to see
Halloween
where the
Barbie.
future of
There is a
Barbie.
Halloween Barbie. She has like a sweater with a pumpkin on
Ooh.
it. It's from the late '90s, so it's not as well remembered. But
Mm,
yeah, I think it's a great way
yes.
to end with the idea of Halloween Barbie. Um,
Mm.
Thank you everyone for tuning into Everything is Gay and the Straight Stuff, and we'll see you for the next episode where there'll be Christmas in our heart and
Woo.
Grinch in my cocoa mug, as it stands.
Ta-ba. Bye everyone.
Thank you, everybody.